Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to class. Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we can, Maureen.
All right, thank you very much. Today's class is on the Nigerian Constitution and Citizens' Rights, but the turnout today is very low, so I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to call your constituent and partners to please join the class so that we can start fully. After that, we are going to take the citation of our facilitator for today. So let's do that quickly. Thank you very much. All right. Welcome once again. Welcome back to class. My name is Mariam Amikun, and I'll be your moderator for today. So our facilitator is already in class, and I will be reading the citation of the facilitator right now. As we do, please kindly make sure to write your name and your party number in the chat box. Don't forget to write that down, to type that in the chat box. All right, so I'll be taking the citation of our facilitator for today. Uchechi is a legal practitioner and an HR professional with a key focus on technology law and regulatory compliance. She serves as a legal consultant to the foremost country adoption agency in Nigeria, Life Foundation Lifestyle. She is the head legal consultant of Zoe Legal, a corporate, commercial, and startup legal advisory firm in Lagos State. She has worked with several local and international bodies in fintech, lifestyle, telecommunications, employment law, and immigration. In addition to her legal practice, she is very keen on public advocacy and the education of Nigerian youth on politics and government. Uchechi is called to the Nigerian Bar LLM in international law from the University of Hertfordshire. She runs a podcast where she speaks legal issues and education among masses. Ladies and gentlemen, Uche is in your sorry if I pronounce that wrong. She'll be taking Nigerian Constitution and Citizens' Right.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
We can
Hello?
hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well. Well, there are about 86 people in the class. I'm sure you had a good lecture and you've had good classes so far. So this class is just going to be sort of buttressing a little bit on all the points that have been, made with the legislation, the constitution, rights, and all of that. We're going to be culminating it into the constitution and citizens' rights. So I would start first by thanking the Electoral College for always inviting me back. That means I'm doing something right. And also asking you all a couple of questions because I'm sure that you've learned a thing or two even before now. You understand some basic concepts that are going to be mentioned here. So I would also like you to unmute at some point in time and to answer some questions that I would pose and be interactive. Because again, we're all Nigerians, we're all experiencing Nigeria one way or the other. So I know that we all have opinions about a lot of these laws, this constitution and these regulations and whatnot. Okay, so I'll start first by asking the class what they understand by the term rights. When you hear rights or privileges or citizens' rights, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What do you understand by the word rights? Anybody, please. There's some hands up, actually. Yeah, you can go ahead and unmute. So I don't have control over. Do I have control? You can just unmute and speak. Yeah, please just unmute and answer if you want to. Can someone help, please?
Okay, Yvonne, you can unmute and ask. An answer, sorry.
Okay, good evening, ma.
Good evening.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I would describe rights as the privilege we all have to be able to do things freely without anyone questioning us or bringing any rules for us to use.
Okay. Okay, so the privilege we all have to do something without any constraints. Okay, that's good. Anyone else? That's Yvonne, I'm guessing. There are a couple of hands up. Stephen.
Okay. Steven.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. Rights, in my understanding, refers to something one can lay claim to. By yes, the ability to lay claim to something, and it is most likely granted by the state. It is the recognized claim to something. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's an interesting one. A recognized claim to something. Okay, anyone else?
Okay, there's Agbaje. Agbaje, you can unmute and answer.
Good evening, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I would say right is something that you can be done for you and is expected of you to be done to others that will not have negative effects, that will not affect another person negatively, or that will be done to you that will not affect you negatively. Thank you.
I like that introduction of it not affecting other people. I think that's a very important point. Thank you, Abaji. So you all are right, actually. It is a privilege that you have. It is something that is bestowed upon you, but it is also something that should not infringe on another person's liberties, right? So in a simple sentence, I would say rights are entitlements or freedom that an individual has by virtue of being a member of a society, right? So they are and should be protected by laws and the Constitution to ensure a sense of fairness, equality, and justice, right? So you can have a right to your compound, right? But that's not a legal right. That's not something that you can that's justiciable under the Constitution. I mean, you can have personal contracts, one-on-one civil arrangements with people, but when we talk about societal rights, these are the ones that are enshrined under the laws and protected by the Constitution. So thank you, everyone. I think those were fantastic responses. All right, so just to run through what we're going to be covering in this class. I hope you can all see my screen. All right, so we're going to be talking generally on the overview of rights. We'll also touch on the legal framework of citizens' rights in Nigeria. We'll also cover civil and political rights. And then finally, we will have a brief discussion on the Nigerian Constitution. We can obviously not exhaust the entire Constitution. We'll just talk about we'll just talk about the rights of the citizens as contained in the Nigerian Constitution. So we've already talked about, what our understanding of rights are, which is actually, in fact, very correct. I'm glad that we all have that idea of, when people say, do you know my rights? Do you know who I am? Do you know my rights? At least you have an idea of what that actually means and what that person is insinuating. Sometimes they're just saying it, they don't know what they're talking about, but it's a good thing that we all know. So the next thing I would like to ask the class is the concept of rule of law. Okay, actually, still on rights. I mean, we have different kinds of rights, right? So the one I talked about, having maybe your property and people not coming in, those could be contractual rights. We have natural rights, actually. Those ones are inherent just by nature of being a human being. That's your right. Obviously, you have a right to life. someone cannot just come and kill you or take your life. That's a natural life, a right that you have as a human being. Then you have the legal rights that are obviously protected under the Constitution. Give me a second. Okay, and then finally we have constitutional rights, and these are rights enshrined in our constitution, for instance, the Nigerian Constitution. So moving on, can someone unmute and tell me what they understand to be the rule of law? What do you understand by the concept of rule of law in Nigeria? Joseph Mago, his hands are up.
Hello.
Yeah,
Good
can you
evening,
hear?
ma'am.
Good evening.
Actually, my hand was raised up to answer the question of rights, but let me just attempt on rule of law.
Okay.
I think the rule of law are to me, to my layman understanding, I just feel these are the laws that are governing the laws that are governing the conduct. I can't really explain very well like this. Thank you, ma'am.
No problem, it's fine. All right, let's have someone else attempt. Agbaje, your hands are up again.
Okay, Stephen speaking, ma.
Okay, please go ahead.
All right. So by the rule of law, I understand it to mean two basic things. Firstly, that everyone will be equal before the law. And secondly, that the law will be above everybody in the society. Thank you very much.
Interesting. The law will be above everybody in the society. So you've mentioned some of the concepts of the rule of law. Okay, so anyone else, please?
Babasile, I've asked you to unmute.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes.
So for me, rule of law is just like a rule that it's governing the state, the people in the state. It's just like a basic thing that every woman being in the state or in the country have to abide with. So if you break the law, there's punishment for it. So it's just a fundamental principle that is guiding everybody living in the territory. Thank you.
Okay. That's a good one as well. Okay, we can take one more person. Donald. I haven't heard Donald today.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
When we talk about rule of law, we are talking about those basic rules enshrined in the Constitution that everyone is expected to abide and obey, whether you are a citizen or a leader. You're expected to obey those laws that have been set aside to govern a particular society or a country. So rule of law is those set aside rules for everybody to obey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, you're all right. You all have the concept of what rule of law is, principally that the law is supreme and everyone is subject to the law. The rule of law is essentially a body of principles that all individuals, institutions, government entities are subject to. You're not only subject to it, you're also accountable to those laws. And those laws are not in secret. They are publicly promulgated and equally enforced, right? And I would also add independently adjudicated. Now, these ideas are what make up the principles of the rule of law. One, we have the supremacy of the law. That means that the law is the highest authority in the land. It is not personal power, is not a personal decision, and also that there is equality before the law. All persons are treated equally under the law. It doesn't matter who you are, what your circumstance of birth is. That's really, in theory, that's what the concept of the rule of law means. It doesn't matter your status, your wealth, or your position in the society. We're all equal before the law. Another concept of the rule of law is also the separation of powers, right? So because you want to maintain checks and balances within the governing society, or the governing parties, or the governing, chair within a society, there needs to be separation of powers. This body would make the rules, this body would execute the rules, and this body would adjudicate on the rules. That's why we have the legislation, or the legislative house, we have the executive house, and then we have the judiciary house, right? And also that the judiciary has to be independent. In any society where the judiciary is compromised, or the judiciary is not independent, then you find fragments, a fragmented version of the rule of law. Obviously, we know that the law also has to have equal application. What is done to A must be the same thing that is done to Z. That's why the law, that's what makes the law predictable, right? If there are any lawyers in the house, you know that in law, we deal heavily with precedents, right? Because we know that when the same matter was brought before the court, this was the same resolution, this was the resolution that was given. We're able to base our argument on that, saying that, okay, this is what you did when this person came to court. You should then apply it to this other person, being that the facts are very closely aligned, or very closely similar. That's what gives everyone the satisfaction that, what, we have a democratic system. Is a democratic concept. The rule of law is a democratic concept, right? It is also a prerequisite, like I mentioned here, the prerequisite in a democratic system of government. You cannot have a truly democratic system of government without the concept of the rule of law. We've already talked about rights. There are legal, social, or ethical principles of freedom or entitlement, right? The rights are the fundamental normative rules about what is allowed of people or owed to people according to some legal system, society, social convention, ethical theory. Why would I emphasize on legal system? Because what the right to enjoy as a Nigerian is different from what you would enjoy if you were to leave Nigeria to a different society. So we owe it to ourselves to stay educated on what your rights are as a citizen of a country, what your privileges are as a citizen of a country. Know it so that when you are out there, or maybe you're involved with any kind of politics or social concept or whatever it is, you know who you are as a citizen, you know what is for your benefit as a citizen, and you also know what your obligations are in terms of those rights and in terms of the people that you're sharing the society with as well. It's a very important thing that we all need to know as citizens. All right, so in Nigeria, what are the things that advise our rights in the society? Obviously, we have our Nigerian Constitution. That's the supreme law of our land. It governs every aspect of our politics, of our law, of our social life. And currently, as we all know, and I hope that we've all had the opportunity to go through it during the course of this class, the current constitution is the 1999 constitution as amended. And this serves as the foundational legal framework for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's divided into various chapters. It talks about the supremacy of the Constitution, the fundamental objectives, fundamental rights, and other chapters that address governance structures and the likes, right? The Constitution is supreme and it overrides every other law. That means every other law is void or voidable to the extent of its inconsistency with the Constitution. And because we are in the Electoral College class, we obviously have the Electoral Act and then the INEC regulations and guidelines on the conduct of elections. We also have international human rights obligations and regional human rights obligations. Thankfully, Nigeria is a part or has ratified some of these human rights obligations and therefore codifying it into our laws and making it now part and parcel of our legal system. I'd also like to mention that Nigeria, I hope you know by now, we operate a federal system of government, right? And that means that power is shared between the central government and the other 36 states of the federation. And because of that, there are some things that it's solely within the adjudication or within the powers of the central government. And then there are things that are concurrent, things that are shared powers between the federal and the state government. And then there are residual things, and those are things that are reserved exclusively for the state. So, you know, there are some arguments that you go into and you realize that this person probably does not have the knowledge of the system of government that we operate. You know, sometimes it's find people accusing state governors of things that are in the exclusive list, right? Things that are actually the federal government's responsibilities. And you find people accusing the president on things that are actually reserved for the state government. So it is important that we have this knowledge as we go on. You know. All right, so we're just going to, okay, so these are just a couple of international instruments of law that we have either ratified or not ratified. I'll just speak on the rights of the child. This one has been largely ratified by almost all the states in Nigeria. I think Lagos State is probably one of the first states to do that. And because of that, we now have the law that is now codified in Lagos State specifically and other states as well. So we have things like Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. We have International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So some of these instruments within them contain broad and, you know, global principles on how to conduct elections, what it means to have political rights, how to present your how to present cases of, you know, infringement of fundamental human rights. And some of them we have obviously not yet ratified. So those ones we can only just refer to them, right? Okay, so moving on, we have what we call civil and political rights. And I want to mention something that I think it was Agbaje that mentioned it. The fact that, you know, just because you have rights doesn't mean that these rights are absolute, right? Rights are, they are your entitlements, but they're not absolute. They are subject to laws in the interest of, for instance, public order, right? Just because you have a right to association or a right to let me say association does not now mean that you go and associate or come together on the highway, on Third Mainland Bridge, on a road where everyone is sharing. That means you are now, you know, infringing on the public order of the society. And by so doing, the state has the right to come in and, you know, disseminate or restore back the public order that you have taken away. So there are different kinds of restrictions to rights. I mean, for instance, you can say, oh, I have a right to freedom. Now, if that freedom is now threatening the peace of that state or is threatening the government of that state in essence, maybe like a tyrannical sort of freedom, you're going about doing things that is directly attacking the peace of that system, then you have now overflowed your right and the state has the right to come in and restore order. There's also subject to public morality, right? I mean, people can say there is freedom of expression. I can dress how I like, I can look how I like. But if you notice in every society, whether it is written or not written, there is like a sense of a morality scale within that society. There are some things that you can actually do and get away with in the South, but if you go over to the North, right, it's probably not it's not as you know, as you would have it at the South, to just put it lightly. So it is important to educate oneself on what is considered public morality within a society, right? I once heard of a story of someone who traveled, a black woman who traveled to Japan, I think, and she went to this very cultural restaurant, and they have the way that they have the things that they do within their society. There's like the culture, you have to remove your slippers, you have to wash your hands and all of these things. And she went there and she was claiming rights, it's my right to do this, I have a right, I'm a visitor here and all of those things. And it caused a public uproar and a debate on who really is responsible to educate, who is responsible for the education on what is considered public morality. Is it you, the visitor, who is going there, or is it the society itself? I mean, if you are a visitor, that means you're a singular factor, right? And you're introducing yourself into a society. It is actually your responsibility to understand what is, to an extent, obviously. And that's why I said some of these laws should be publicized. If it's not publicized, then it's not your responsibility, right? But if you're going into a society, at least the bare minimum thing that is expected is to understand what the expectation is for the general citizenry, right? Because if you go there and you want to like impose yourself, you're sort of going to cause, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb, right? Obviously, there are things that are against fundamental human rights, which of course those want to be addressed separately, but things like a moral sense of appearance, respecting maybe public statutes that are all over the town. For instance, in North Korea, you can't just go and be touching the status of the guy, the Kim Jong-un. You'll probably be arrested. Things like that, you should actually you actually have the responsibility of educating yourself on, right? And then there's also the restriction as to national security. Obviously, if your right is now threatening the peace and security of the rest of the citizens, it's going to be curbed, essentially. Yeah, so we have civil and political rights, and these are classes of rights that protect individuals' freedom from infringement by governments, social organizations, and private individuals. There are the rights to vote in an election, a right to join a political party, right to run for office, right to participate freely in political rallies, events, or protests, right? I know that there's a sense of political apathy with the nation. I think gradually we're learning that really this country is ours. If you're going to be apathetic about the system of governance or the society or the government, really, you still have to leave, except you have plans to leave. But at the end of the day, you will always be a Nigerian first, So at the end of the day, it is still our responsibility to participate fully in the politics of the country, in the social system of the country, right? Because the American observers are not going to come and vote in the election for you. They don't have that right. It is you and I as Nigerians that have the right to vote. So you say, oh, I'm not happy with the elections, I'm not going to come out and vote. You're you not acting is actually a response in a sense, right? Inaction is actually action. That means you're choosing to allow whatever cause of action is going to flow from you're not participating to take its course, right? So we have the right to vote at all times, and it should be exercised. We have a right to join a political party. I know that a lot of us youth, we are sort of desensitized towards joining political parties. I remember in the last election, it was a conversation with a group of friends that, you know what, we can actually join and participate. And, we started thinking of how to get the forms, how to register. And it actually wasn't difficult at all. It wasn't difficult. we went for the meetings, you know, we were heard, and we were able to, you know, contribute in one way or the other. Right to run for office. Obviously, there are rules and restrictions as well. There's the age limit, there's the qualifications and all the things that's required. But as a Nigerian citizen, it is part of your civil and political rights to run for office. There's the right to participate freely in political rallies, events, and protests. Civil rights also includes ensuring people's physical and mental integrity, life and safety, protection from discrimination on grounds such as race, gender, national origin, color, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, or disability, and individual rights such as privacy, the freedoms of thought, conscience, speech, and expression. I mean, we're going to look through each of these fundamental human rights as it is codified in our Constitution. Okay, just to break the silence, can anyone highlight to me ways that you feel that you're able to enforce your rights in Nigeria? What are the typical ways that you can enforce your rights in Nigeria as a citizen? Okay, we have Omar. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
Umar, I've asked you to unmute.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Umar Abubakar Sadiq, APC. The ways that with which I, as an individual citizen of Nigeria, can enforce my rights: one, participation in election by voting and being voted for. Two, I have the civic right to pay tax. Three, I also owe Nigeria. It is my right to stand attention during country's anthem. And I think lastly, I will say I have the right to be what? To be heard, and freedom, and yeah, right to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. I think what you did is listed some of your rights. I'm specifically asking about how to enforce your rights. So enforcement would arise, or a need for enforcement will arise when your rights have been infringed upon. By infringe, I mean when someone has gone against your access to that right, or someone has restricted you in one form or the other from enjoying the rights that you rightfully have. So how can you then ensure that that right, you know, comes back to you? So essentially, how can you enforce the right? And this is,
I think that is why we have the law courts. So I think the courts, it's the top, you know, enforcer of the law whenever my rights, whenever my right is being trampled upon. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Can we have a lady this time? Mariam, do you have anything else to add? Miriam.
Miriam Omar. Okay. I've asked you to unmute.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think the first thing I need to do is to know my rights. So after knowing that, I'll be able to know the next step to take. And if any of my rights are violated, I'll have to document it and report, file a complaint, or seek for advice, or get a lawyer who would fight for me. Yes.
That's very, 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 very interesting. And I like the angle that you came from. So first of all, you should even be aware of what exactly is your rights in this situation. So case in point, I saw a video once while I was scrolling, I think it was on TikTok, and a lady was talking about her experience with the airline, you know, how her airline or her flight was constantly being moved, you know, constantly being moved. And then there was a response to that video. And from that response, you could see that a lot of us in Nigeria, right, we are in this cycle of something wrong has been done, and we complain about it, we probably put stuff up on social media about it, but we haven't really thought about educating ourselves on, okay, so what exactly is my power in this situation? And someone had taken the time to actually spell out what the aviation law actually said in that situation. And it turned out that she actually had a cause of action against the airline. And she was able to educate herself and send a letter to the airline. And she actually got compensated, So I like that you said, know what your right is, first of all. Know what the right is. First of all, have the documentary evidence, and then know what your right is. Sometimes you might not even end up going to court, because the first step of knowing your right is actually power in your hands, right? Because when you present the fact that you know your right to some of these bodies or some of these organizations, some of these companies, they're like, okay, this person actually knows what they're doing. Let's even try and resolve it before it escalates to a high court, or to, because if you know some of these companies, they actually like to maintain their reputation. They don't like bad press. They don't like being put out there. So once you are aware of your rights, then you can then think strategically on how to go about it. Great. Going to court is actually the right way, or the last way, or the last resort of enforcing your right. And it is actually very valid. Other than court, you have the multi-door court system, right? You have mediation, you have arbitration, you have conciliation, which are faster, cheaper ways, I would say, of enforcing your rights. And they're actually accepted by the courts, especially if you go through the approved multi-door courts systems. So thank you, everyone. I think you all actually have good knowledge of what that is. Stephen, did you want to add something to that, or should we quickly move on to the next?
Thank you very much. What I just wanted to add is the media, the press. That one is also extreme. And well, the Nigerian society, the judiciary sometimes can be unreliable. Let me just put it like that. So the press, and many of these organizations don't like their name in the mud, just like you mentioned. Thank you very much.
True, thank you. But I would agree with you, media. But first of all, I would still say understand what is available to you, right? Because sometimes before going to the media, write to the party first. Because if you start a smear campaign without even approaching them first to even try and resolve, then it seems as though you are actually attacking them, right? Because under the law, if you have been wronged, you actually have to make a demand first, right? There's something called a demand letter, a notice of demand, right? So you should actually initiate that contact first before going to the media. But good point there. All right, so political rights, these include natural justice. So obviously fairness under the law, the fact that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So if you are accused, you have the right to a fair trial, due process, and the right to seek redress or legal remedy. We also have rights of participating in civil societies and political societies, such as freedom of association, right to assemble, like we've mentioned, and the right to petition, right to self-defense, and the right to vote. So these are essentially part of our civil and political rights. All right, so we'll just go quickly to our citizens' rights as provided for in the Constitution. So I'll throw this question to the House. Do you think that the human rights are respected in Nigeria? If you say yes, why do you say so? And if you say no, why do you say so? I would like for us not to be sentimental. Let's actually be very factual in our responses. Act like people who have gone through the electoral college classes, and be informative in your responses, right? So anyone can go. Is human rights respected in Nigeria?
Okay. Like, I've asked you to mute.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the lecture. It's a good one. Well, for me, in Nigeria, our rights are not fully, respected. Why did I say so? Because if you look at, what is going on in Nigeria, if someone who is rich or a political class is in trouble or is in court, the way they handle it is different from the way, people at the level class or the poor, will have their right. For example, let's take a look at what is happening now in what is his name? Dele, for example. They brought him from Lagos, took him to Ekiti State, and before you realize, they sent him to jail. And from what you have taught us here is that nobody should be guilty unless proven. So all these things are the elements that when we look at it, we say it is partial. I would say our rights are being partially respected in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for citing examples like a lawyer would. I appreciate that. Okay, so can we have Lucky Imo Yang?
Lucky, I've asked you to mute.
All right, please. Thank you very much. Everyone. I wanted to say our rights are being respected. Though I agree with
very clearly.
All right, I said human rights are respected in Nigeria. Now, why I'm saying so is because whether the person is rich or influential, that person is a human being. And then whether we think there is bias in some ways, so we're talking about human rights now. So those persons are humans, right? However, I think sometimes as Nigerians, we give up easily sometimes when, some quarters, except people who are now educated. And that is what the college is doing for us, empowering us with
Sorry,
knowledge.
there's someone making marks. Ucho Patrick. Your annotations are visible in case you don't know. Sorry, go ahead, Lucky.
Okay, please. So the law is very clear and open to everyone. It is, most of us are just getting to know about the Nigerian Constitution or to have the Nigerian Constitution in the first place just recently in this college. So when, like we've said over time in this class, if you don't even know your right, you will just be there thinking, oh, human rights are not respected because you don't even know your right to start with. So I think what we are being taught here is that we should know our right before you even start pursuing it, because you can't pursue what you don't know. There are instances that you may think you are right, whereas in the real sense you are not, because where your right stops is where the right of the other person begins. So we need to have that. I think that human rights are being respected in Nigeria. Is just that most times people are too lazy to follow through, or they are too ignorant to pursue their rights and to even know what their rights are in the first place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucky. That is a breath of fresh air. It's good to hear people speak in favor of the Constitution. I'd say it's good to hear people speak in support of what we already have on ground, because a lot of times people just generalize the fact that, the laws are not working. And it's like, let's even know what we already have first of all. Let's even understand where we are first before we start. But I agree with the first speaker as well. He did cite a very valid example. But at the end of the day, I also would align with Lucky to a large extent as well. So we'll take one last person and then we'll move on to the next question. Can we have Alaro Zakaria? They call.
Okay. Alaro, back to your mute.
Beside my house where they live.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I think in Nigeria, our rights are fully respected. So, like the first speaker said, he made mention of Dele Farotimi. Dele Farotimi was trying to express his freedom of expression while defaming another person. That is an encroachment on the rights of another individual. So, which made a warrant for his arrest. And again, the just concluded end bad governments, end bad governments. That's protest. That's also an attestation to the implementation of human rights in Nigeria, because there is right to movement and right to express our concern about government activities. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, this is a very far cry from the responses I receive whenever I go through this question. So I'm very excited to hear some of your responses. It's quite very different, but yeah, I'm happy to hear that. All right, so we'll just move on to the next question. So I'll just have one response and then we'll go on so that I don't take too much of your time. It's almost 6 o'clock. All right. Does the justice system have the will to treat the issues of human rights without fear or favor? What do you think? Kabiru, do you want to go for that question?
All right, Kabiru, I've asked you to unmute.
Okay, hello everyone.
Hello.
In my own opinion here,
I can't hear you. You're muted.
I think we lost him. Let me ask him. Kabiru, are you still there? I've asked you to unmute.
yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. The system of Nigeria is not equal for every woman in Nigeria because the fear and favor is not there, because there's some huge people in Nigeria, or some amount of people in Nigeria that the law of Nigeria is not there to work on them. So I don't think that fear or favor is not included. So fear and favor is included in Nigeria human rights because they cannot fight for everybody as equal. So that's my own opinion there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, let's just move on to the next question. Does the country have institutional framework to tackle and grapple with human rights abuses? So that question is asking, do you think that the institutions, the parastatals, the ministries we have currently is enough to tackle with the human rights abuses that we face? Let's have Omar Abubakar Sadiq.
Mar, back to your mute.
Thank you. I think yes, because the Human Rights Commission, they are doing their best, but though not enough. But generally, if we take a honest overview, I think we have a strong, institution framework to actually attend to the issues of human rights abuse. But unfortunately, one of the contributors earlier, most Nigerians don't even know in their state, they don't even know the office of the Human Rights Commission in their states. So it's not enough for one to go on social media spaces and rant that this is bad, and whatever. Do you even know the office of the Human Rights Commission in your states? That is a place to start with. All right. Have you even been there? I stay in Kaduna, for example. I work hand in hand with Human Rights Commission. The state government has a ministry that takes care of human rights, especially. So all these things, if we don't have enough information about what these institutional frameworks that guides our rights, we don't have reason to go online and rant. So I agree with you to say that what yes, we have enough institutional framework to take care of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for that. So we'll take the last question. Does the Nigerian government know what human rights and tenets of democracy are? The Nigerian government, do you think the people that are governing you, do you think they understand what human rights and the tenets of democracy, like the rule of law, separation of powers, supremacy of the Constitution, do you understand what that is? So let's have someone who hasn't spoken before. Benjamin Emeka. Oh, okay. It's off now. We can have Donald Nachi.
Donald. Donald, I've asked you to mute. You speak now.
Okay, I think the government, they know about all this, and although I wanted to talk about the institutional framework, concerning rule of law and how the rights of citizens are being treated in Nigeria. These frameworks are there, and the government is also fully aware of those frameworks and whatsoever is put in place to make the society work the way it ought to. But just like we've been discussing, even we the citizens don't have those basic knowledge and understanding of what we as citizens ought to know. So that lack of knowledge, that lack of awareness by the citizens is why sometimes some people trample upon the rights of other people, even some government officials, some people in power. Sometimes they trample because the citizens don't have the basic understanding of what their rights are. So when people get enlightened and understand their rights as citizens and they stand up and speak for it, sometimes you will see that what the right thing is being done. Now, even during the military era, you could see when people like Gani Fayemi will stand up for the rights of people like Femi Falana, they stand up and speak for the rights of people, and they follow the right channel through the courts, and people's rights people get justice for what they maybe they've gone wrong or whatsoever. They justice is served to them. So I think the major problem is we having the awareness as citizens of our basic rights and then pursuing it. So I think that is where what is lacking. Not that those frameworks are not there, not that people in power are not aware, they are fully aware, but we the citizens need to be reawakened and be aware of these things. Thank you.
Can I just say that this is my favorite class so far. I feel like you guys understand. You know what's up, for lack of a better word. And I feel like the problem, we will start to resolve the problem when we start to look inward, right? Because if you think that the Nigerian government or the people that are ruling you do not know what human rights are, do not know what democracy is, do not understand the Constitution, do not know what your rights are, then you've not started. The issue is, like the last speaker rightly said, right? People that know what these rights are, they know it in and out, right? And they lord that ignorance over us. The fact that we, the masses, we, the people, we have decided to not be informed. Granted, there are situations where even when you apply your rights and things like that, it probably doesn't always go through. But the truth is that Nigeria has basic institutions. Nigeria has basic systems. What we already have is enough to lead us to wherever we want to go to. We don't need a new constitution. We don't need any new ministry. What we have on ground was created and fashioned and enough to deal with what we what we're currently going through. And that's the truth, right? If we first of all do the work of understanding where we are as a nation, what the Constitution even provides, what the rules are, what our obligation, what our duties are, let's even get that work done. The thing about going on social media, I mean, it's fun, it's exciting, it's all the things, but how far does that really take us? How far does that really go? We do the protest thing and then that's it, right? We do the whole slander thing. At some point, it starts becoming a joke, and we go around that circle. But they're actually laid down procedures on how to seek redress or how to address things. There are things that you can do, even to an already elected person. There are processes that we can take. If we really want to put our hand to paper, we can't see changes happen, and that's what I would like to. I understand that there are people who have tried, and but if the majority of the citizenry actually are educated, not only will you speak as someone who is informed, right? Your arguments will be more layered and will be more targeted to the institutions that are responsible, that are supposed to answer to. Imagine accusing a governor of what is, or no, imagine accusing a vice president of what is actually the responsibility of a legislative house. It's like, what are we doing? So I mean, it's a breath of fresh air to hear, people actually understand that our issues lie in largely ignorance, largely misunderstanding, largely doing things that do not necessarily bring out the right change that we want to see, right? The average American understands what it means to be aligned to a political party. If you call out, an American tells you they are Republican, even without explaining what it's, I mean, right now it's already being mumbled up, but what a true Republican stands for, you can already deduce, you can already, like confer on that person, and that person rightfully would align with those ideologies. Although now it's beginning to change. What I'm saying is the average American would align with political ideologies for a reason, right? The average American understands what it means to go out and vote because of the impact, the power that you have in that respect, right? The average American understands what a police check means. Like, it's something that is ingrained in them, that when a police stops you, these are the things that they are required to ask you for. And if they're not able to make their request in this way, then you're not obligated to respond to them. Granted, though, in Nigeria is a whole different system. There are loopholes here and there, but let's even get educated is the question. But then this is not a class for that. It's just really to pass on information. So let's stick to the curriculum. All right. So the different rights contained in the Constitution. This Oche guy has decorated my slides, but it's fine. So, under our Constitution, we have rights to freedom of thoughts, conscience, and religion. You should know this, that as a Nigerian citizen, you should be able to think freely, associate with any religious organization that you choose to, right? And you shouldn't be discriminated upon any of this concepts, because your constitution has given you that right. Now, when I talk about thoughts and conscience, there was this thing a while back during the elections where people were almost bullied into switching their political affiliation. And it's like, you can make your case, you can argue intelligently, respectfully, but you don't start bullying people online. Can you imagine? Look at who she's voting for. She has the right to vote for whoever, or align with any political party, or have a thought about a political party. It is on you to then try and convince her or not, on whether or not that's appropriate to do, but to like shame people on their thoughts of a political association is actually not proper, right? So we'll just move on to the next. Right to freedom of expression and the press. Obviously, these are not absolute rights. Yes, we do have right to express ourselves. We do have right to criticize the government, even because it's a democratic system of government. We do have right to, and again, that's also the function of the opposition, right? Sometimes, in fact, numerous times after an election, the argument just dies down. The conversation just dies down. No, your work as the opposition party has just started, right? Granted, your person was not voted for, but you have the right to stand as a watchdog to ensure that whoever is being voted for is on their toes. They bring out a law, they want to pass a bill, they want to change a regulation here. You put out your own statement, put out an article, put out a word, you come together, you oppose it, So our work as, or if you're in the opposition, but your work as the opposition doesn't end at election day or when the election results is announced. No, you continue, because I mean, this is still a society that we both have to exist in. So you still have the freedom and the right to put forward your opinion. I think this man does it very well. Once in a while, you will always see him write or speak for or against something that the government is doing currently, or something that is not currently being handled properly. That's just a political, tete-a-tete. It's something that is expected of the opposition. That's how to politic, really. And the press as well. I mean, you have the right to comment, you have the right to post your views on social media, but it's also very important, like we've all been saying, to say things intelligently. If you want to hold people's gazes, let it be that you are getting your information from the right source. You've educated yourself, right? You're speaking you're speaking about something that is not just for you, but for the benefit of other people. It's not just, oh, I don't like this guy. Can you imagine the way he smiled? I don't like his wife. Those kinds of arguments, they're not progressive. They're not change inspiring. It does nothing for us. You just waste time, and maybe it starts turning into a ridiculous thing, but we actually have that responsibility to stay educated, to make educated arguments, to actually put out things that are, catalysts for change indeed, and we start again by educating ourselves. We have the right to peaceful assembly and association. I mean, we've already talked about, the protests, even sometimes political rallies, you have the right to gather, you have the right to associate with whoever you want to associate with, but obviously it has to be within the confines of public morality, national security, and respect for the next person's right as well. Right to freedom of movement. Obviously, you can move around Nigeria, you can move around, go anywhere you want to. But because you have freedom of movement, you cannot now go to another person's house and go and lie down on their bed and say you have freedom of movement. No, obviously, it's not an absolute right. Your rights are within a context, right? You can move freely, you can move on public environs freely, but then if you go into private property, that will be seen as trespassing. Right to freedom from discrimination. Obviously, the different tribes in Nigeria, gender, there's the male and the female. We have different skin tones as well, different statuses, right? There's the wealthy, there's not so wealthy. You shouldn't be discriminated based on any of these things, right? We're, as Nigerian citizens, we should have the access, right, to any public, accommodation or public, public statue or office. You should be able to access it freely, based on the fact that these things are actually there to serve us as citizens, right? Granted, some of these things, they have their requirements on how to enter, but it shouldn't be, oh, if you're not a light-skinned person, you can't. I mean, sometimes you find some company job posts to say a person has to be light-skinned. Such things are actually discriminatory, and if a person actually knows their right, they would be able to call an action against such a thing. Being discriminated based on your sex or your gender, all of these things shouldn't be. Right to acquire and own immovable property anywhere in Nigeria. That's obviously very self-explanatory. All right, lastly, we'll just go through the INEC regulations and guidelines for the conduct of elections. So under the INEC rules, we'll have some guidelines for the conduct of elections. Obviously, as citizens, we'll have a right to be informed about any voting, public voting schedule. Obviously, it shouldn't be a private thing, or it shouldn't be posted to a certain sector of individuals. Everyone should be informed, the date, the time, the venue of where they should vote. Everyone has a right to register to vote, so the registration should be publicly done. You also have a right to vote and be voted for if you are contesting as well. You also have a right to recall an elected representative. This is something that is not very popular in Nigeria, but yes, that right exists. Just because you have elected someone into office doesn't mean that that's all. Whatever the person does, you have to accept it. Yes, there's something called a referendum. Granted, it's quite a journey to complete the referendum, or to do it to the end. But if we're actually very strategic, if we know what we expect from our public office holders, even from the moment of voting, we would be strategic about getting information of people, knowing who and who is voting and who is voting for who, so that when the time comes, right, we as opposition were able to converge together and put fire to people's toes and ensure that, what, you actually do what you were elected to do what you had promised. So have a right to secrecy when voting. There was a time I was hearing people were being harassed and being asked, who did you vote for? Who did you vote for? That's absolutely wrong. Your vote is your choice and you have a right to secrecy. I don't have a responsibility to tell you who I voted for, who I didn't vote for. It is my right as contained in the INEC regulations. I have a right, you also have a right to attend rallies, campaigns, political parties, and vote for any candidate of your choice, and you have a right to information about an election. Okay, so conclusively, I would say the Nigerian Constitution outlined in its provisions fundamental human rights. The problem is not that the leaders do not know about the law. It is also a problem of implementation, right? For any development to take place, government should find a way to marry democracy, rule of law, and human rights. Thank you very much, everyone. And we're open for questions.
All right. Thank you very much, man. That was such an enlightening class and very informative. We really appreciate you. I'm pretty sure everybody on this call today have learned a lot. So we're going to be taking questions now. If you have any questions, kindly drop them in the chat box or raise your hands, okay? Umar, I've asked you to unmute. Kindly ask your question now.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you to our facilitator today. Beautiful, beautiful insights. I have two questions, but I want to start the first one with, let me draw allusion from the book 1984 by George Orwell. Though it's a dystopian character, but then most of the things Orwell highlighted in his book evidently are happening in our time, in our country currently. Now, there are two characters or two symbols in that book. One, Big Brother, who serve as the government. Two is the eye. That is constant surveillance. Now, we can use the eye, we can describe the eye as the media now in our contemporary society. Now, the question to that regard is this. Do you think government should really or necessarily be interested with what citizens post online, either criticism that are constructive or those that are a bit insultive? Should government really be thinking about that or doing the needful? That is one. Then the second question, talking about rights entirely. I wanted to shed more light on disability rights in Nigeria, because it seems, even is it in terms of employment, in terms of even politically, the disabled are a bit disenfranchised even before the election. Oftentimes, INEC has said that they are going to bring mechanism that will ensure that the blind, the deaf, the dumb can go and vote. But election day will come. Is that same old story. So what do you think we should do to what? To contain the rights of a disabled politically? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. So I'll take the first one first. You talked about George Orwell's book. Fantastic book, actually. You said that the media would be the eyes in Nigerian context. I'd actually disagree. I don't even think Nigeria has the capacity as it stands to monitor people per se. We're not that developed, I would say, to be able to monitor what people are doing. I think it would just be perhaps the information that you choose to put out there. That's what would be captured. But other than that, okay, maybe to a large extent. But talking about government and social media, I would say this, in as much as we are interested, or we're now moving to that social media age, the government of the people as well, we would do them good to also, gradually pick interest in the social space, because nowadays that's where you hear the voice of the youth, that's where you hear what's going on, and you wouldn't really put much blame on them if they want to control the narrative. In a sense, they're not the first to do it. Bear in mind, the Nigerian government are not the first to do it. Every Western government, one way or the other, they want to have an eye or a control over the narrative that's put out about them. Case in point, in the United States, I don't know if you heard about the fact that they've been an issue of a ban on TikTok. Why? Because it's a Chinese, maybe it's a Chinese company, and they're not really able to control the privacy laws, the sort of information that is put out there. So in that way, they're trying to sort of take back the reins and force them to register in America. So when they register in America, they'll then be subject to American laws. That means they'll have to submit all of their private dealings, and they are obviously subject to scrutiny, and they may not also have that monopoly rights as they do currently. So there is that interest. Typically, every government is interested in what's going on in the social media space, because social media has such a huge quota. I mean, there are billions and billions of people that are online, and per second, so I mean, Nigerian government would not be exempted from that. What I would say is, perhaps, if you notice, at first they do the whole ban thing and then they relax it. I would say that they get adequate information, or they get adequate advisory on what that actually means, because they can act on impulse, like, oh, this is being said, let's ban it. But the ban usually does not last, because again, if we go through our constitution and the fact that we are running a democratic system of government, you cannot, hold up a ban for so long. Obviously, the lawyers, there will be an uproar, there will be a debate. You go back to the legislative house. Okay, how long can we really sustain this thing? So if you notice, those things don't really last, and after a while, it comes off, right? So I would say that the duty of the government really is to be educated and to the media has come to stay. The media has come to stay. The youth has found a voice in the media. They found a power, sort of, that they do not ordinarily have in their day-to-day lives. So as much as possible, is either you comply or make proper use of the seats that you have, or people are actually going to go up there and say things. But then my advice would also be that you still remember that your rights are also still not absolute. Even in the social media space, you could still be subject to a libelous statement, right? There's still the laws of libel, scandal, and all the things. So whatever you're putting out, it should still be truthful. It should still be verifiable. You can't just say, oh, let's overthrow the government. That's a tyrannical statement. That's a felony. You can't just make crazy statements like that. But the government will always want to be where the people are. So you can't really ask them not to exist in that space. But then you obviously need to be advised on how far they can put reins on what they want to put reins. I mean, they can say things like, oh, I mean, you're not registered in our country, and by our country laws, you need to be registered in order to have access, or have to have some kind of monopoly. Those are valid. Those are actually valid. And in a sense, we may not always see these things as negative to our citizenry, because they're registered in Nigeria. That will also mean employment opportunities for Nigerians, right? Would also mean that Nigerians will sort of have a stake in all these media giants as well. So it may not always be a bad thing, even though it starts out like the government is trying to shut us off, but having presence in the country, and also us having some kind of control over the narrative that is being put out there, is also an important thing for us as well. I'll go to the next question. I believe that question was about disability rights. Fantastic question. Fantastic question. And I'll say yes. Yes, actually, there are disability rights in Nigeria. There's the Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Act 2018. It contains things like anti-discrimination, accessibility, equal rights and opportunity, provision of employment, access to public services, and the likes. So because some of these rights are sort of like, they are not exactly justiciable, right? Because we have just non-justiciable rights in the Constitution. You can't really say, oh, I'm going to take them to court or anything. They're sort of like guides for the state government or the federal government to sort of work with. I would say that it is not the responsibility of the citizens, right? Who you're voting for, do they have this? Sorry, excuse me. Yeah. Oh. Sorry about that. Okay, so who you're voting for, do they have these burdens in mind, right? Because if you vote for someone who does not really consider this as something major to act on, then it's just going to be something in the background where they're like, oh, okay, I mean, it's not really important. But if you're someone who, if we're a society who actually puts people to order and follow up with actually making sure that people do what they actually said they would do. For instance, a state like Lagos State, I would say largely have done quite a number of things for people with disability. I know that this lady, is it Adenike, she was instated as the personal assistant or a special advisor on disability or something like that. And she did quite a lot. There was a lot of conversations around it. There was it was even implemented in some public spaces, right? The wheelchair thing and accessibility for disability and on all of that. So I think that again, it's now to us as well. It's also a responsibility to ensure that we push with the bills, lobbying and things like that, just ensuring that the laws are actually brought to life, right? The rights are actually brought to life. Things that matter, things that are of importance to us actually implemented by the government that we have actually elected. It's not a day's work, but it's something that is actually attainable. I mean, Lagos State, I think they've done quite a lot. There's still a lot to be done, but the laws are there, right? The laws are there. So it's not a question of, are these rights even in existence? They are there. But the people that we have chosen to bring to power may or may not be exactly having this at the forefront of their minds. Then it's then on us to then push, conversations, debates, writing articles, getting their attention to ensure that, these things are actually, brought to the limelight and given the priority that it deserves. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ma. There's a question in the chat box by Temitope Ogunlano. She said, thank you for sharing so well to this evening. Aside the Constitution, are there other resources you recommend for knowing citizens' rights?
That's very interesting. That's a very good question. I would say that yes, the Constitution is very important. In fact, all the rights that you need to know, you would find them in the Constitution. For other resources, okay. For other resources, I would say there are the international instruments. For instance, for children, you have the International Instrument on Child's Rights Act, which obviously, has been codified by Nigeria. And then there are several legal frameworks that are also available. We have, for instance, the Freedom of Information Act, which obviously provides citizens with the right of access to public records and information. We have the Labor Act, which is for workers, people who are employed. So things like your fair wage, working conditions, protection against discrimination, you find it there. Then we have the Violence Against Persons Act. This one is particularly for women, protection from gender-based violence, your rights against those issues. And then we have the Electoral Act, which I've already mentioned. And then, like the previous person who spoke, Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Act, and that promotes the rights of persons with disability. Then for international conventions that we have ratified, I mentioned the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and we have the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. So these are important documents to, refer to. We also have the National Human Rights Commission, right? I think someone had mentioned that some of us, we don't even know the offices of these human rights commissions in our environment. I think it's important to actually identify those offices where we are, understand what their role is, understand what you have access to even before the need arises. Again, sometimes we always feel like, oh, the police is the only resort that we have, and police is so corrupt and we don't really have any other way to go. This is an important office that we can all get acquainted with. They investigate complaints and they monitor compliance as well. We also have NGOs. There are a couple of NGOs that actually safeguard citizens' rights. We have Amnesty International, monitors against human rights abuses. We have there's SERAP, I think, like an anti-corruption unit and things like that. So yeah, I would say that there are a couple of them, and the ones I've mentioned are good ones to start with.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. Orogu Benjamin, I've asked you to unmute.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much, the facilitator, for this evening. We sincerely appreciate your wealth of knowledge that you've drawn and given to us. So mine is not like a question, but a comment. I don't know if I'm free to make a comment.
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. So I want to just make a very controversial comment. Human rights violation, human rights infringement, and every negative controversies that surrounds human rights is becoming a pandemic in Nigeria that we are not even seeing it the way it is. But this is just a tip of it. Now, the problem of Nigeria is Nigerians themselves, and we can't take that away. Now, we asked a question on if Nigerian governments, which is talking about the personnel in the government institutions, if they are fully informed when it comes to human rights, when it comes to human rights documents that are there, the framework and its implementation. Most of them don't even understand those documents. For example, a few weeks ago, allegedly, I saw a video of a particular council chairman in the FCT making a comment that he doesn't have the powers to purchase security vehicle for security agencies to carry out their security duties. And I love the response that the FCT minister gave to him, because he can't tell me that, excuse me, that the document you used to swear an oath on the day of your induction into office, that you did not go through it before the swearing in and after the swearing in, and if we understand it that way, a particular legislative personality will not come and tell us that they want to ban social media. That's because he doesn't understand some of those rights. Now, I remember one of my fellow students here made a statement about Dele Farotimi. You see, Dele Farotimi, now, because when you are farming, when you have a farm that is close to a king, you need to be very careful. All the comments that he made in his paper, all the queries, all the accusations and the claims that he made, we haven't even looked at it. Rather, we are focusing more on his infringement on another person's rights. And now Nigeria is such that there is freedom of speech, but your freedom after your speech is not a guarantee. So those are the things that we have to look into. Now, it is a problem on both sides, both those in power and those outside the corridors of power, that we need to take more steps to, for human rights education. National Human Rights Commission is not that present as we think it is. I agree with my brother who said that he works closely with them, but how many local government areas, ward desk offices do we have human rights desk offices? Even the ones that are available in some states are even underfunded and under-equipped. I can't run to you now that my right is being violated somewhere else, like a fundamental human right, and I expect you to use your vehicle to in this kind of economy to come and come and carry out some due diligence and research to know if my claims are true. So it is something that needs an approach from the government to do the needful by equipping every framework. Also, those in power should learn to study documents that are available. Like you said, there are documents available in every right that you can think of. That's why the constitutions are there, our rights are there, but there are exceptions to every right. There is freedom of speech, but there is a data protection right there. There is an infringement of human rights there. That if you violate it, they will let you know that, yes, you have these rights, but there are exceptions. So the human rights education is necessary. Human rights facilities are also necessary to be made in place so that people can understand their human rights. All right. So now let's ensure that whenever we speak of these human rights, we are also looking at getting people to be aware. We are just a few number of us on this call. What about other alleged 200 million Nigerians out there that don't have access to this opportunity that we have here? So there are a lot to do when it comes to human rights. And if we need to take action now. My name is Orogu Benjamin Emeka from the Labour Party. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. I think you've spoken very, very well. Definitely a lot of points that you raised there that we need. It's a call to action to everyone, and I appreciate your opinion and your airing your views on things. Then you mentioned about the Human Rights Commission office not being visible enough in different local governments and things like that. It is true, but sometimes, right, we just say, oh, okay, the government should. Sometimes the government would actually dance to the tune of what is loudest. If we are actually talking about on social media, we're talking about how Davido is coming late for his concerts in a cool hotel and why the police is not arrested. It's like if we all collectively shone the lights on the fact that, oh, wow, the Human Rights Commission offices in our different local governments is actually inactive. What is the government doing? believe you me, that would actually go up in priority. Before you know it, there's something being done. Yes, I know that the government has the obligation to know all these things and do all these things, but the truth is that if we are not loud about it on our own, if we just look at it and say, oh, okay, it's the government's responsibility to do it, they probably will not even think about it because it's like, okay, it's not really affecting them that much, That's the society that we are in. You actually have to be loud about something. You have to speak up about something. You have to show that it's really biting you. You know what is supposed to bite us and what is not supposed to bite us. So the first step, I believe that it's what we're doing here, and that's being educated. And I agree with you that the education should not stop here, right? What you have learned here, take it out to your little communities, your small groups, your friend places that you have influence in your social media as well. Let the conversations now be more refined, now be more issues targeted, not just aimless arguments, aimless debates, aimless dragging of people. Pick one point that, we feel like this needs to be addressed and keep flog on it until it garners attention and, becomes what it should be, but thank you. I like your point of view. That's a really good one. Thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. We have a question in the chat box by Ibi Clement Yusuf. He asked that what can we do about the right to freedom from discrimination when a citizen's right is trampled upon by an elite who possesses the power to influence the outcome of the case in his favor?
I mean, that's
Hello,
a very
Ma.
specific. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, fine.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's a very specific.
Yes, fine. I can hear you.
Yeah, so I'm saying that that's a very specific question. Obviously, I would have to know the merits or the facts of the case properly to understand what you mean by an elite. I thought I heard airline. An elite who possesses the power to influence the outcome of the case in his favor. I think something that someone mentioned here, I think would go in this instance. So you've done all you need to do. Okay, there was even a case. I don't know if you guys heard about the case where a lady was dismissed from the army, and she had reported one of the army officials for sexual harassment and things like that, and then she was dismissed. But then she went to the media, and I really, really appreciated her boldness, and she kept speaking about it. I'm not sure with the position of the case at the moment, but it garnered so much attention. And even this case of this lady that talked about the tomato company, that's the lady that criticized the company online, and she was arrested and whatever, I think at that point, going to the media would actually be a good step to take, right? So you've done all you needed to do. You followed all the procedures. You have spoken to the right resources. You have applied all the legal channels that you know to. I would actually suggest that you should blow a horn about it, right? Because as much as we want to say that Nigeria, the laws, people are doing what's supposed to do, we can't ignore the fact that there are still people who benefit from, being very scrupulous, maligning on people's rights and things like that. And I think that at some point, when you've done all that you need to do, then talk about it to the media, talk about it on your media, garner people's support, talk about it to people, let the persons that can help you out. But I think that you should not be silent about it. You should not be silent about it at all. But I mean, that's what I would say.
All right, thank you very much, Ma.
Yeah, very cool.
Okay. Babatunde Tade, I've asked you to unmute. Kindly ask your question in a minute. Thank you very much. Babatunde Tade, are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Yeah, thank you, Ma. this is a wonderful session. Really, open my mind to many things about rights. But what really I want to ask is that why is it that we always say rights is not absolute? Why is it that government officials, when they are in the system, when they are in governance, this law seems to be absolute to them. What they say is, what they get. But when they get out of power, that is when we see EFCC say chasing them, saying they embezzle. And they see them embezzling when they are in the system. Why does the law not provide that kind of, principle that could even, pick them or even convict them when they are in the system? That's just it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. I mean, there's something called, well, someone has already said that something called immunity, in the laws, in the Constitution. Some positions enjoy immunity while in power, and because of that, they're not able to be prosecuted while they're in power. These are some of the things that people are trying to change. People are actively trying to change. I mean, it's not just a Nigerian thing. In some systems of government, that's how it is. After you have, in a sense, it's also like, so the idea for it was that so that people would have the mindset of doing what needs to be done, and the fact that because you were elected there, it was for a reason, and because people felt like you had the right disposition, the right mindset. So whatever you're doing it in the name of the state, in the name of the country that elected you there. So while you're in office, it will be very disruptive to start prosecuting someone in power. So that should be done afterwards. But I mean, we can see the downfalls of that, but that's what the law says until you amend the law before you're able to do that. But as it stands, you cannot try a sitting president. It has to be after or the other officers that are enjoying the immunity. So that would be my response to that.
All right, thank you very much. That box by Peter Otegbere. How can citizens differentiate between constructive criticism and destructive criticism of a government? Here's another question. All right. I'm so sorry. Finding it hard too. All right. If citizens' right is trampled upon and they seek redress but to no avail, what should they do? That's the second question.
Okay. So the first question is how to differentiate between constructive criticism and destructive criticism of the government.
Yes,
I believe that constructive criticism are criticisms that are directed at the actions of the government, right? So instead of criticizing a person or being personal about your critique, criticize the actions of the government, their policies that they come up with, their changes that they come up with, their rules, their there are different promulgations that the government comes up with. If you have an issue with it, then you present your criticism clearly, stating why it's being criticized, stating the aspect of the law that is being undermined, stating the aspect of the citizenry that is being undermined, and provide alternatives or solutions to it. Destructive would be something that is inciting a tyranny against the government, something that is inciting hate, that is not progressive in a sense, like it's not remedial in a sense. You're just attacking the government without any, again, it's very subjective, right? It's very subjective. But then one thing I would hold on to is that you're criticizing the actions of the government, not the persons in government per se, right? So you see it time and time again in Nigeria where maybe the person that you voted for did not win election. Well, instead of you to say, okay, fine, the person that is now elected is elected. Okay, so let me see what they would do. They've done this. Oh, that was not good. This is what you should be doing. You should just be abusing the person aimlessly, criticizing the person's character, judging their family. That's like, there's no direction to it. It's not going to bring about any change. Again, I think this man does it very well. He does it in a very healthy manner. Peter Obi, whenever he's criticizing, he talks based on actual actions, policies. He's very directed. He's very, backed up by factual, promulgations that affect the citizens. It's nothing personal, because the government is the government. You can't change it except you follow the appropriate procedure of changing the government. You can't just go online and be like, this man should leave in the next 3 years. Well, he's been elected for 4 years and he can't leave until there's another election. So things that are lawful, things that are action driven, and things that are also remedial are constructive. But if you're just staring down and being slandering and telling lies, then I believe that will be destructive. And the second question is, if citizens, I think it's also another way of the previous question where you said if an elite is opposing your freedom, or targeting your right to freedom, and a seek redress but up to no avail. I would also, as a lawyer, I would want to ask, how did you seek redress? What exactly did you do? Have you exhausted every single avenue of redress? You can actually have access to your elected officials. You have access to them. Just that we just feel like those people are worlds away from us. But there are people who actually find their way and send letters, write proper, letters that are being read and actually being invited for conversations. There are people that have gotten jobs from it. We talk about how, we want this to change, we want this to change. Why don't you write a bill? Write a bill and send it forth. Most of these people, they are looking for people who actually have the know-how, the technical abilities to put these things together and execute them. So I would say, I would ask, what kind of redress did you seek for? Have you absolutely exhausted everything that's available to you? Because there's quite a number of things that are available depending on the kind of rights that it is and the circumstance and the location as well. Because what's available to someone in Lagos may not necessarily be that accessible to someone in, say, Zaria or something. I don't know. But yeah, it'd be subjective. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. Nuhu Dambo, you have asked you to unmute. Kindly ask your question in a minute.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, good evening, everyone. That's quite elaborate. Mine is actually coming from a brother who spoke about the issue of military, and I begin to wonder if it is the function of semantics, maybe in our constitution or so, where we see parity and the accuser both, if I am correct, are both learned colleagues in their respect. One claiming his character was behaving, and the other two actually was trying to say some things about also his right. I mean, maybe his right was infringed upon. So I don't really understand this. Is it that our laws have a lot of ambiguity that sometimes, even some of these, learned people would play around it to, I am a bit confused here. So, and if it is that, yes, some certain laws have ambiguities, and that is why we are seeing this kind of thing. How do we now, as a people, try to reduce some of these ambiguities, so that people can actually seek redress, or there are some things that ordinarily, when they happen, you know that no, your right is not infringed upon because the law states this, and that is where it stands. So I'm really a bit confused about this. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that question. I'd say that there are quite a number of, laws that are maybe contradictory and ambiguous, or sometimes even there are lacunas in the law that are not actually there's nothing really in place. So people maybe use it to their advantage or use it to their favor and things like that. I think that where a law is ambiguous, it can be both a blessing and a curse to the person who is faced with, the need to have that law interpreted. It could be a blessing in that if it's ambiguous, then is a cause for then getting it interpreted properly or adjudicated upon proper. For instance, when we had the election, there was that whole debate about if Abuja, the portion where it says to third, was Abuja considered and whatever, So when a law is ambiguous, it's actually very exciting for lawyers, because it's an opportunity to create a precedent. And if you're the one that is currently faced with that law, then you could have it in your favor if your arguments are good. But then, again, for a lot of these ambiguous portions, there've been a lot of articles written about them. There's been a lot of opinions already by persons who have done their research. I would say read up on them, just understand exactly what both parts are saying on all the different coins or faces of the coin to it, just so that you know how to apply it favorably to yourself. But at the end of the day, it will be subject to interpretation by the court. But again, depending on who you're working with, or if it's a lawyer, if you're doing it alone, then you still just need to understand the different aspects of the coin so that you are well informed to understand, okay, this part does not quite align with my own facts. So that means there should be a difference in the way that is applied. But again, these things are subjective, really. But yeah, ambiguity is something that we have to deal with. But it could be a good thing, depending on how you see it.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. We'll take two more questions before we go because of our time. So Wellington. Okay, Joseph Magu, I've asked you to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Ma. Ma, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much for the enriching lecture that you delivered. My own concern is about so many innocent persons that have been locked in Nigerian correctional or prisons without being tried, without being given a fair hearing. Some persons, when you visit prisons or cells, you discover that they spent years without being even given any chance of fair hearing, like in the court of any competent jurisdiction. And so I assume that their rights have been trampled upon like that. So how can we, as citizens who have become enlightened about this, go about looking for ways to fight for the rights of some of these persons? Some persons, when you interact, it's as a result of people who have the means, who will even tell you that they will lock you into the cell, into prison, and then throw away the key because they have the means and some necessary connections that they can touch some places, and then their order will be effected, and then you continue being incarcerated and keep on suffering. So as people who have been enlightened, if I've come across a case like that, how am I going to see to it that such a person is being free? And again, You mentioned during the course of your delivery, I think you were answering a question. You say that some other instruments that can be used. You have mentioned apart from the constitutions to I think you mentioned interpretation or to guide the rights of an individual, the external laws. But according to the Constitution of Nigeria, I think the only laws that are demonstrate in the country are that is the constitution, the laws that are found in the constitution. And if any other laws which are not from which are outside the country are not domesticated into the country, they do not have any effect on anybody unless if they are adopted. And in the case such laws are not adopted or then we do say that the constitution override any other law. So if we have to bring any other law outside the country which is not in the court of in the Nigerian constitution, how are we going to effect those laws on the rights on individuals in the country? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Joseph. Those are really good questions. So I'll start with the first one. Someone who is awaiting trial for years and hasn't been able to be arraigned on time or hasn't been able to obtain fair trial. So I'll just one way to go about it is to give them legal aid, is to help them with legal aid, honestly, because once you have been what's it called, reprimanded or in prison, it's a very difficult thing to try and help someone without the help of a counsel. And a counsel would be someone who actually knows the legal process of getting the person out, because that's the thing with rights, right? Once you've lost your rights, your freedom of movement or freedom of enjoying public life or whatever, now you can't just go on social media and start you now have to seek for appropriate legal means of helping that person, and the best way to do it is just to get the help of a lawyer. Now there are various legal aid. So if that the person doesn't have adequate resources to get a paying lawyer or something, there are legal aid services that provide free representation. There are organizations. I know some churches actually do have like legal aid. There are pro bono initiatives. I know a couple of lawyers that take on pro bono cases for those awaiting trial. And there are also like public interest litigation. I mentioned SERAP, Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project. So they actually help. And there's also access to justice. They can help to file suits to compel action on prolonged detention. So there are actually legal ways to go about it. So I wouldn't say you as a person, that's if you're not a lawyer, I wouldn't advise you to like start doing anything necessarily. The best thing to do is just to help them with legal aid. Either pay for a lawyer for them, or you seek out pro bono initiatives that can support them. I know a couple actually that have helped a couple of people out of prison, and they're actually quite good at it. So that's what I would say. Then to the second question, you mentioned some international instruments that are not you said they're not domesticated. So the term I used was ratified. So domesticated, ratified means the same thing. Some instruments have been ratified into Nigeria, and once they're ratified into our laws, they become part of our laws. And the ones that I mentioned have been ratified. So they are actually codified instruments that we can refer to. There are some, for instance, the Child Rights Act, because child's right is a residual. Is it concurrent or residual? I'm not quite sure. I think it's residual. It's under the residual list. That means it's the exclusive reserve of the state to adjudicate on, or to legislate on, not adjudicate on, to legislate on. So that means that each state individually must codify it into their law. So even if Nigeria, although it's concurrent, so even if the federal government codifies it, each state needs to codify it separately before they can actually use it as part of their laws. I think by now, I think about 80% of states have codified the Child Rights Act. So it's actually a law in Nigeria. The ones I also mentioned, International Convention Against Discrimination of Women, that one has been ratified as well. The other one on civil and political rights, that has been ratified as well. So African Union Charter has been ratified as well. So those are domesticated international instruments that Nigeria has ratified. So if you have any matter, you can actually refer to them, you can, reference them and so on and so forth. But however, there are others that are not codified or domesticated, like you would say. We lawyers would usually use them as like backdrop arguments. They don't really like I don't want to say sway, but just sort of like additional argument. They're not primary sources of law per se, but you can just use them as best practices all over the world, standard practices all over the world, where of course if you're a country and you want to be progressive, or you want to be seen as a country that actually respects human rights. If I say all over the world, people's rights as to I don't know, as to maybe clothing, what they wear is codified. I mean, that's a valid argument, even if it's not necessarily codified in our laws. You can still put it in there. It may not be a determining factor, but it can help your argument, is what I'm saying. I hope that makes sense. Sorry, I'm a bit tired. Hello. Okay. I think I can take one more question and then we can call it a day. I don't know where our host is. Can anyone hear me? Sorry, I don't know what's
Okay,
going
hi
on.
mom. I can hear
Okay,
you.
all right.
I'm so sorry. I lost my connection. All right. Okay, so we're going to take Wellington, and I think that will be the last question for today. Thank you, ma. Also, I don't have the host's privilege, so can you please help me unmute him? Thank you very much.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, facilitator. Firstly, I'll start by also reiterating the fact that the National Human Rights Commission in Nigeria, aside from it being underfunded, that institution or arm of government is sorry, that institution and arm of government is not independent, and so it leans on the government's decisions in terms of when human rights cases and abuse are being reported to it. It has no it has no will to kind of act because the government decides what happens there. So as it stands, that institution, from my own experience, isn't really existing. Then I'll go to my question. Are existing human rights laws sufficient to address modern challenges, especially in the area of digital privacy? When you look at what's actually going on in the country, a lot of persons are being disappeared. Each time they are critical, they form like they are critical of the government's policies and decisions that are made. It is easy for them to reach out to the banks or to most of these mobile telecom operators to easily get your data. And once they do that, wherever you are, they pick you up. So this is just it. This is just my question, please. Thank you.
Okay. So on the question of the comment on the Human Rights Commission, I don't see how that is still, even the fact that it's not independent still doesn't stop them from serving its purpose. I mean, we have the Ministry of Youth and Social Development that handles child welfare. They are obviously not independent, but they still see to it that children are properly taken care of. If there's a case of abuse, child rights abuse, they have the right to come in and take a child away from his ward and commit the child to the government, to the state. The child now becomes the property of the state. So just because a ministry or a parastatal is not independent doesn't mean that they are not able to fulfill their obligations. Now, the question of funding and whether they're actually as active as they need to be, that's a different thing. But I mean, if they're stated to be, you know, they were established for a purpose, then all you just need to know is what was the purpose for this establishment and how am I able to file a complaint and where are they located. So those are the key things that you should probably refer to, except you're talking about rights that were infringed upon you from the government. I mean, the government that is infringing upon your rights, not a fellow human being. So you're saying that because they're part of the government, they're not able to adjudge properly. That's a different case entirely. I mean, if that's the case, then you probably go directly to the courts then. Courts will probably be the best system of redress. Now to the second question, I forget what you said. Oh, you were talking about whether our current human rights laws are able to tackle modern issues. So this is the thing, right? Is throwing the baby and the bathwater away. Our constitution, like if we really, really went through the laws that are already available, right? If we even knew what the laws were that are available, you will realize that not only are they enough, but they are largely adaptable. The wordings of the laws, the wordings of this framework are broadly worded, aligned for interpretations to suit evolving context. Granted, specific details may not necessarily be there. That's why you have new promulgations like the Data Protection Act, which was not too long ago promulgated, right? That is still aligned with the provisions of the Constitution. Is not in any way going away from what's already provided for. But these laws are still broadly worded and they allow for evolving context, right? And there are documents as well, for instance, the Constitution again, that provide for comprehensive protection. You know, the words are very, very broad. Yes, there are challenges in terms of, you know, technological advancements, data privacy, digital rights, and all the likes. But I would say that even if our laws do not have specificity, right, there are regulations that are coming out day in, day out. The CBN properly and periodically is always bringing out regulations to guard the framework of, say, fintechs, for instance. There's always one regulation that it's literally playing catch up, unfortunately, but they are constantly trying to match with the progression with tech fintechs and the like. So I would say that take advantage of the fact that they're actually the laws are still broad currently, because it will come. A time will come where all of these laws, in fact, currently, they are being worked on, they are being debated upon, they are being put together, So I would say it's a good time to be innovative, to evolve, to bring out, to participate in technological progressions. But at the same time, you can't just there are still laws that still protect you to an extent. Yes, it may not necessarily have the specific details of, but the laws are broadly written, and one way or the other it can fall under. For instance, if someone takes your money online, there is the consumer protection rights that you can still bring them under. So there are things like that. But this is where the intelligence of a lawyer would come in. So the lawyer would then have to see a way to bring in that infringement into one of the laws that are available, right? So that's what I would say to that.
All right, thank you very much, Ma. We really appreciate it. It's really been an exciting session and insightful session, and I believe everybody here is very well learned from this session today. So I would unmute so that everybody can thank our facilitator for this amazing lecture. So I will unmute everybody now. Kindly say thank you. I will bring the class to a close. All right, can I unmute now? Say thank you. Hello, can anybody hear me?
Thank you, ma. Thank you so much, ma.
Thank you, ma. It was a helpful
Thank you
lecture. It was really open-minded.
Thank you very much, ma.
God bless.
Thank
So
you,
we'll see
guys.
you again next weekend.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night rest.
Thank you very much. That was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Lisa. And well done. Well done. You guys are doing so well. Thank you for having me. To everyone at the Electoral College, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.